Good evening, race fans, and welcome into a site that is pretty unfamiliar to those of you who regularly tune into the iRacing broadcast done on this channel. Tonight, we are out here at the Daytona International Speedway, arguably one of the most iconic tracks, maybe not even in the entire United States, but maybe quite possibly just in the entirety of North America. Tonight, we are here with round number one of the Enigma Truck Racing Series, the first ever race of their first ever season. It all begins right here. This is where legends are going to begin, race fans. And I'll tell you what, 100 laps at this 2.5 mile or 4.02 kilometer speedway is bound to be quite the event. That said, drivers are already making their way down to the starting grid, so let's take a look down there and see just what these drivers have in store for us here tonight. Starting out on the pole of tonight's event, that's going to be the number 5 of Ross Phillips, kicking it off in first place for the first ever race of this league. Back in P number 2, to starting to his outside, that's going to be the 24 of Corey Blevins. Back in third place, that's the number 89 of Justin Phipps from one of the Carolinas coming out, and we're starting off in row number 2. Fourth place can go back to that 69 of Larry Dickerson, another driver out of the Carolinas, a driver from my own home state. Back in P number 5, that's going to be the 88 of Scott Benedicts. Back in sixth place, it's a driver we've seen pretty much every Wednesday for the past 3 months. That's the 37 of Art Hendren. Seventh place can go back to another driver that we have seen pretty constantly throughout the past 12 weeks of late model racing on Wednesdays. That is the 12 of Kenny Tripp. Back in P number 8, another driver we've seen regularly back in the Pro American Late Model Series. That's the 66 of Mr. Johnny B, coming out in P number 8 at the Daytona International Speedway. Ninth place going to go back to the 83 of Michael McElroy, with Brent Mex in the 6th, rounding out the top 10 here tonight. 11th going to go back to the 29 of Kevin Church, with Joe Lotreneau in the number 22, rounding out P number 12. 13th going to go back to Dwayne McMahon in the number 87, making his first ever truck race start. Not just his first ever start here with the Enigma Truck Racing Series, but his first ever start in a NASCAR truck as a whole. And finally, does not look like he has made the call to the grid here tonight. That is the 82 of Zach Scare. He is going to be rounding out the field here tonight as the last driver to have registered for the race, but does not look like he will be making the start. So the last position can go back to the 87 of Dwayne McMahon. That said, at a track like this, 2.5 miles in length, naturally we are only going to have a single pace lap around this speedway. And as we come out of turn number 4, drivers are bound to start getting a little bit antsy. After all, all these past couple of weeks of organizings have all come down to where we are right here, right now. Green flag up in the air. Let's get this thing rolling. 100 laps at the Daytona International Speedway. And right now off the start, both lines doing pretty solid. Looks like for the most part everyone wanting to get down to the lower line, but that 24 of Blevins, who is currently being scored as our race leader, he is holding on to the lead very early on. That said, Ross Phillips has decided he does not like what's going on here. He's going to pull it on down to the inside line. He's going to hold it down there below the double yellow, and just like that, he is going to lose 12 positions. He's going to go all the way back to the back of this field, and now that's going to have that 69 of Larry Dickerson up here in the front of this race. That number 69 Engelman Syndrome Foundation Chevrolet going to be leading the first lap of tonight's event. Right behind him, that's Justin Phipps in that Mountain Dew number 89 right now. everyone playing it a little bit safe. Everyone did have a bit of discussion during the drivers' meeting before the race, and everyone came to the conclusion that this is a very, very long race. There is no good to come from pushing it 3 wide and being generally aggressive in the first couple laps of this race. That said, Larry Dickerson going to be making the same decision that Ross Phillips did. He's going to be letting off, going down to the inside line, and falling all the way back to the back of the field. He does not like what's going on up at the front of this race. He wants to take a little bit of a breather and let everyone get themselves sorted out. After all, with how unstable these trucks can be, especially at these high speeds, going roughly 180 miles per hour right now, nobody wants to be the unfortunate victim of someone having just a little bit too much of a wiggle in their steering wheel. A little bit of a nudge there between that 12 and 88 machine. The 88 and 89 Phipps and Benedict's now bump drafting a little bit down the front stretch. Gonna lift off just a bit, heading down into turns 3 and 4. Despite how flat the front of these trucks look, for the most part, bump drafting is not the safest play, not exactly what you want to be doing here. Because even if they look flat, iRacing seems to think that they are just a bit round. And if you're not square on the bumper of the car in front of you, there is a very good chance that you will be sending the driver in front of you spinning. That said, everyone heading down low as there is a lapped car up in front of him. That is the 82 of Zach Scare. Looks like he was able to make it out to the race after all. He just chose not to qualify and not to come out to the starting line for those initial pace laps, but he is out here on the speedway now, currently being scored 4 laps down in that number 82. Not an impossible amount of room to recover, especially in these next 100 laps, but it's not where you want to be starting off your race. But of course, first ever race here for the Enigma Truck Racing Series, first ever race for everyone here under this banner. So some of these drivers are just going to be opting to take it easy, get the ropes under their belt here tonight. Is a little bit of trouble. Scott Benedict's getting very loose coming off of turn number 4. But right now, everyone just playing it safe, getting a feel for each other. Not a lot of these drivers have prior experience competing against each other. So for tonight is a little bit of a warm-up race, so to speak. Of course, it is 100% counting for points. This race counts just as much as any of the other races on the schedule do. But for right now, drivers are going to be taking at least the early goings of this race to just get used to racing around one another, get a feel for what their fellow competitors are all about, and maybe even start planning just what they're going to need to do to win the championship coming in 12 weeks from today. Here in the Enigma Truck Racing Series, there is no NASCAR playoffs like there is in real life, so the champion will be determined purely on points earned from these events. Finishing position is all that matters here tonight. Not going to be having any special locking into the championship or anything like that. It's just going to come down to who has the best, most consistent season throughout these next 12 weeks. Still 2x2 pretty much all the way through the field. The outside line doing just as good as the inside line is here tonight. Not any worries for those cars up on the high line, which I know is quite the distinction from what we normally see on our broadcasts here on this channel. Pretty much every single broadcast done up to tonight's race has been short track racing. And I'll tell you what, these NASCAR trucks handle a whole lot differently than any of the cars we have seen on these broadcasts before, and Daytona International Speedway is a track unlike any other that we have ever covered before. So whole lot of new sights and sounds, both for the drivers out in this field and for us up here in the broadcast booth. And of course, Gotta take a moment from the Enigma Truck Racing Series and myself to thank everyone for tuning in and supporting this budding new league and getting excited for what incredible racing is going to be going on for these next 12 weeks. Michael McElroy, that number 83 Crew Racing entry, currently up in the lead of this race. He is up 8 positions where he qualified, and Joe Letourneau, he's up 9 positions from where he qualified. So 2 drivers having a very amazing run. A little bit of trouble, incredibly loose off the corner. That's the number 22. That's Joe Letourneau that was getting incredibly wobbly up on the high line, and he's still a little bit all over the place through these corners, going up almost all the way into the 3rd lane in that number 22. It does look like he might be having a little bit of handling difficulties under that number 22 entry. He seems to have gotten it stabilized heading down the backstretch here. Nothing too much to worry about right now, but again, in the corners, he just becomes a little bit of a wiggle worm in that number 22. Not enough to risk spinning out quite yet, but we're only 9 laps into this 100-lap event. If he continues to wiggle around like that, when we get into the longer run of tonight's event, that could start to become just a little bit of an issue. Speaking of tires and being a wiggle worm, here in ETRS, drivers are given 3 spare sets of tires down on pit lane, so should they decide that they need it, which ultimately, especially at Daytona, I would imagine that they might just in the later parts of this race, is Letourneau. Again, a big wiggle, but it's a wiggle that might just be what it takes to move him into the lead of this race. But McElroy, Belvin's, Phipps, and Benedict's all very much in this battle as well. But they do have 3 sets of tires down on pit lane that they can put on these trucks should they feel it is necessary later on into tonight's event. But right now, these tires should still be good for everyone throughout the field. There's not really any risk of them going bad this early on. But everyone being patient with each other, being a little bit, dare I say, gentle, is now McElroy. McElroy's down on the low line, and he is losing positions fast in that number 83. Looks like he decided he wants to bail out on the front of this race. He is not comfortable with how things are going. He has fallen all the way back to the 9th position in that number 83, so still running, not all the way back in the back. But he's decided, nuh-uh, I don't like what's going on in the front. I'm going to pull off and leave it to Corey Blevins as the new race leader in that number 24. Hot on his heels, that 88, that's Scott Benedict's in the Marines.com Toyota, putting a whole lot of pressure on that number 24. Blevins rocking the same 24 that we all know and love from the Rainbow Warrior. Jeff Gordon running the same 24 that we know from his NASCAR car back in the early to mid 2000s. And it looks like Levin's going to be falling back a couple of positions up there on that high line in the 24. There's just nobody up there to run with on the high line right now. The low line where you want to be, unlike on our normal short track broadcasts where it being where you want to be because it's just the faster way around the speedway. In this particular instance, the only reason you want to be on the low line is because everyone else is down on the low line, and drafting is a major factor here at the Daytona International Speedway. As a matter of fact, drafting pretty much is what will make or break this race. Everyone's best lap times currently in the 49-second range. That's because they're drafting. In the single lone car qualifying, everyone's lap times were in the 51 to 52 second range. So call it 2 or 3 seconds a lap just from lining up nose to tail and letting the forces of aerodynamics take effect on their cars. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit more unfamiliar with NASCAR, here in this series, as is with pretty much any NASCAR racing series on the iRacing.com platform, just like in real life, there are multiple different manufacturers that actually compete in the series. If we take a look up at the timing and scoring tower, that's 3 different manufacturers there. The Toyotas actually are up in the lead of this race. So 2 out of the only 3 Toyotas in the race. Then we got 2 Ford entries and the rest all Chevrolets. So it looks like we know where our drivers' allegiances lie. On the iRacing.com platform, these 3 cars have identical handling characteristics, identical aerodynamics. They are all functionally identical to each other on iRacing. The only difference is the actual looks of them. So when you take a look down there and see the different styles of truck on the track down there, know that they are functionally completely identical to each other. It's just a matter of representing whichever manufacturer you happen to be the biggest fan of. Kenny Tripp, the new leader of this race, getting very loose throughout turns 3 and 4, wiggle wobbling back and forth, but it's 4 cars battling it out for the lead of this race, and that's 66 of Mr. Johnny B, looking to try and get involved there himself. Everyone a little bit all over the speedway. Pretty much anything above that double yellow line is valid racing surface. For the most part, you want to be going nose to tail with these other cars, but if you were to want to decide to be a rebel and go against that, no one's really going to stop you, but it's not going to be beneficial to be breaking that draft. And looking up on the high line, that 22 of Joe Letronau, he is making up their work from it. A bit of wiggle, almost down there into that 88 of Scott Benedict's, but he's got it going where he needed to be, and just behind him, Corey Blevins looking to maybe try and suck that nose up to the tail of the 22 and do a little bit of bump drafting. Try and keep in pace with the 12 and the 88. A little bit of trouble. Scott Benedict's incredibly wiggly going into turn number 3. Darn near turned Kenny Tripp, their current race leader. But everyone gets it sorted out. Everyone getting a little bit feisty here. 17 laps into the books as we cross the line. Not even a quarter, not even a fifth into the way into this race, and drivers starting to bump and bang with each other. Kenny Tripp going down below the yellow lines. He got knocked loose from the 88 of Benedict's. He kept it going. Very good driving by that 12 of Kenny Tripp to not end up spinning. Everyone keeping their cars where they need to be, but whether or not they're going to be doing that for long is the ultimate question here, because if drivers keep driving the way they are right now, it's only a matter of time until something goes up in flames. Currently, though, our top 6 kind of breaking away in their own pack. Then throughout the field, drivers for the most part single file, but still all very much in this race. Looking a little bit further back throughout the back of this field, let's take a look back at Mr. Dwayne McMahon, a driver we have not talked about all that much right now. That number 87, the blue and white entry down there, unsponsored car for McMahon. Like he said, this is his first ever time competing in a NASCAR truck on the iRacing.com platform as a whole. Not just here in this league, of course, since this is our first ever race here for ETRS, but as a whole, first ever race for Dwayne McMahon. And he's actually gone up a couple of positions. So all things considered, he is having a pretty solid run for the most rookie of a rookie you could possibly have. He's a driver that we are definitely going to be having to keep our eyes on down here throughout these next 12 weeks, because I'll tell you what, I have a driver, I think this is a driver that has a whole lot of potential out here in the series. Says he's kind of new to driving in NASCAR as a whole. He's done a couple of races in the NASCAR Cup Series on the iRacing.com platform. Started that back in October, but this is his first ever time in the trucks here tonight. Just behind him, Michael McElroy. McElroy was up in the front of this race in that crew racing entry, but he moved it on back. Not happy with how things were up front, and looks like there's trouble up in the front, and that's the disaster we all knew was eventually bound to happen here tonight. Trucks everywhere. Some of these cars, smoke billowing out the hoods of them. They probably would be on fire, except we don't have fire on the iRacing.com platform for reasons. But that's 3 cars down on the infield, all with smoke pouring out of their engines. That's 3 drivers that are probably all going to be having to retire for the evening because there is no fast repairs here in ETRS. So all this damage is not just going to go away. They have to spend a realistic amount of time down on pit lane. So I'd expect for Church, Phipps, Johnny B, all 3 of these drivers involved, that's probably going to be the end of their race. And if it's not, then they're going to be spending a good, call it 20 to 40 minutes at best down on pit lane. That said, let's take a look back and just try and diagnose what all went wrong for these truck drivers on lap number 18. Looking down here at the 66, that's Mr. Johnny B in that gray and orange entry, and a little bit of nudge from the 22. That was more cars involved. That was the 22 of Joe Locherneau, the driver that I was having concerns about. He was being a little bit of a wiggle worm in that number 22, and eventually it all just happened to fall apart. Let's see if we can't get another look back at that. Maybe even break out slow-mo just so we can really see what all would happen. Joe collects that 66 of Mr. Johnny B. Johnny B on that incredible transition from the banking to the apron, so pretty much no way to control the car up under him. He goes up into the outside wall and a massive impact. That alone is some pretty severe damage. He comes back down, collects the 89 and the 29, the 89 Justin Phipps and the 29 of, I believe, Kevin Church, all 3 spinning around. And thankfully nobody else involved from the looks of it, not in any serious capacity. Let's get one last good look back at that real quick. Let's see if we can't ride on board with someone here. Maybe let's take a look back at the 5 of Ross Phipps. Let's ride on board with him going into that incident. Heading down into turns number 3 and 4, he sees a little bit of trouble happening, but he can't see much because there's a rear view mirror in the way. So let's take a better look back at that on board with Ross Phillips. Let's actually break out the GoPro helmet cam here, and you can see a little bit better. Heading down into 3 and 4, cars getting loose, and he knows to just slow it down, and chaos ensues up in front of the field. I'll tell you what, race fans, if you ever need to deploy a smoke cloud somewhere, get about 5 NASCAR trucks going at roughly 180 miles per hour to slam on the brakes at the same time, and you will get your wish. And now, as the pit cycles go through, we did have several drivers come down to pit lane. Actually, it looks like every single driver on the field came down to pit lane, except the driver we were watching right now. That is the 87 of Dwayne McMahon, who is now on the front row of this race. He is being scored in P number 1. We will just have to see, will his strategy play off for him? I'll tell you what, if I were him right now, I would be incredibly nervous, which is a statement of my character more than his. But if this were my first time ever driving this car, which it is for Dwayne, and he is starting in first place on a restart with every car behind him presumably on brand new Goodyear tires, that's a whole lot of pressure to be putting on a driver in his first ever race start. So we'll just have to keep an eye on him and see how things go on this restart. That looks like that is the 82 maybe? Let's see if we can't take a look. Oh, nope. That is the 82. That is Josh Scare getting put back up a lap. He is still 2 laps down from the looks of things, but he will be the lucky dog. He will be getting at least 1 lap back. And I'll tell you what, if we have more cautions like that, then we could potentially see Scare get back up on the lead lap. Not entirely sure what all just happened there under yellow, but it looks like everyone's getting their cars stacked back up the right way. Lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car, and it's going to pull off down to the safety of pit lane. So we are going green, this time by Dwayne McMahon, Corey Blevins. The front row of this restart, green flag up in the air. And McMahon, despite being on older tires, off to a pretty decent restart. Drivers going up through the gears. They gotta floor it. They gotta go to the highest gear this truck has to get it rolling around the speedway. Unless you're in the draft and you're in a pretty significant draft, you're basically going to be going full throttle all the way around this speedway. That said, McMahon, he's going down to the low side, and it looks like maybe those older tires are doing him in. He is falling back to the 4th position just like that. Benedict's and Blevins both getting around him with no trouble whatsoever. And Kenny Tripp right there is in the picture as well in that number 12 machine. Nearly thinking about making it 3 wide, but not quite. He's just going to move down to the low line, go down in front of McMahon. And they're going to start doing a little bit of a freight train around this speedway. Call it about 8 cars in this lead pack before we go back a couple more positions to some cars that don't look like they are going to be able to catch the draft. That is the 5 of Ross Phillips riding back there by himself in that Chevrolet. And then even further back in the speedway, that's Michael McElroy, the last car on the lead lap in that number 83. Things not looking good for these two drivers because right now they have no way to catch back up to our race leaders right now. Up in the front, Corey Blevins is our race leader. He qualified in P number 2, so only 1 spot gained for the driver of that number 24 machine, but it's the 1 spot that matters right now. That said, as we cross the line, only a quarter of the way into this race, we still have a whole lot of racing left to go here at the Daytona International Speedway. I would like to just take a moment and say, though, if you are interested in coming out and racing for the Enigma Truck Racing Series, just gotta look up iRacing League 6357 and send an application to that. There is a $15 entry fee that goes to putting up the sessions, putting up hosted races for recruitment, helping support the broadcast, and of course, going towards the cash prize for the series champion in 12 weeks from now. So if you'd be interested in competing, pretty much the only real requirement is to be a clean and respectful driver, and that is again league number 6357 for anyone that is looking to join on into the Enigma Truck Racing Series first ever round of their first ever season here tonight. I'll tell you what, looking ahead to the rest of the schedule, I think that this is bound to be a pretty fun season. There's a very nice mix of longer tracks like this and some short tracks out there. And next week we actually head to the Lucas Oil Speedway, which comes in at under a mile in length. I think it's about 3/4 of a mile in length. Then Martinsville later in the season, North Wilkesboro later in the season, Iowa later in the season. Quite the variety of different tracks that these truck drivers are going to be having to test their mettle at. So it's not just a question of who is the best speedway driver. You got to be good at ovals in all of their different lengths and configurations here in this truck series. Single file for our front row of drivers, though. Everyone, they saw that first wreck, they decided, you know what, I don't exactly want that happening again. Let's all just ride it out. Let's get to these last, maybe call it 20, 15 laps or so, and then we're going to start battling, and that's when the gloves are going to come off. Because I'll tell you what, it really doesn't matter where you are right now. It really comes down to where you are when the checkered flag flies, and it's a whole lot easier to be patient and drive in line and make the pass on the final opportunity than it is to try and pass right now. Use up your tires under your truck. potentially cause a race-ending wreck for yourself and multiple other people, as we saw in that first caution, and just put a whole lot of unnecessary risk into tonight's event. That said, drivers are looking to try and pass each other deck here a little bit. Art Hendren just got around Dickerson, and McMahon has fallen back down another position. He is back in P number 8, and McMahon is coming down to pit lane in that number 87. He's going to lock up the tires. I think he managed to bring himself down to pit lane speed, though, in that number 87. He's going to be putting himself in a bit of a pickle here because every other driver on the speedway pit under that first caution. And now Dwayne is going to be taking tires down here, and he's going to be stranded a bit. Because when he comes out, unless he gets really lucky with the timing of this and comes out right as behind this pack of cars right here, he's not going to have any opportunity to catch back up to the field. That said, it is still possible. Because I'm looking down here, McMahon's on his way out of pit road right now, heading down into turn number 1, and the rest of the field coming across the finish line right now. So McMahon might have actually timed that right. It will end up putting him a lap down, but he'll at least be able to stay in the draft of this pack, and if necessary, if a caution were to come out, he would be the lucky dog here. Now you can see McMahon down there at the bottom of the screen, so our lead lap trucks approaching him incredibly quickly here tonight, but it should just play out into his favor. Of course, he's still going to be in a bad position since he was the only driver to pit under the green flag so far. But at least, I think the best way to put it for McMahon right now is that at least it's not worse, because it could be a whole lot worse for him right now. And sure enough, looks like there is another little bit of a draft chain going here. This is Michael McElroy, Ross Phipps, and not Dwayne McMahon. This is Ross Phipps, Michael McElroy, and the 82 of Zach Scare. So Scare is currently a lap down, but these 3 drivers have hooked up. And this is exactly the teamwork that you need to have if you want really any chance of recovering from losing the main pack of trucks. Because without the draft, you are going nowhere. So these 3 drivers working together, using aerodynamics to push all 3 of them faster. And along with that, being in the draft actually does help you conserve fuel just a little bit. So these 3 cars, 32 seconds back, a little over half the speedway behind our main lead lap cars. But with the 3 of them working together like this, there is still potential for them to get back into the swing of things. It's not going to be easy, but it's not going to be impossible for McElroy and Phillips. Up here in the front, things mostly looking the same here tonight. Everyone being a little patient, being a little easy on each other. Blevins and Benedict's making up P1 and 2. They have held on to the front of this race for the past, call it about 10 laps now. Really, everyone is just trying to make it to the late stage of this race. That says trouble a little bit. That's the 22 of Joe Lotreneau again, being a little bit wobbly in that number 22. He was there in that initial incident, but he's got the truck rolling still. Wasn't picking up any significant damage from it, but either way, not doing himself any favors with how loose that car is getting through the corners. Goes in front of him, Brent Mex in that 6, up 6 positions from where he qualified pretty fittingly. He is up in P number 4 right now. Having a pretty solid run here tonight. Right now, currently running for the pink number 6 team. With Joe Lotreneau right behind him. 2 pink trucks here tonight. Though I suppose you could consider Mex to be a little bit more on the purple side. Either way, colors we don't really get to see in racing all that much. So definitely cool to see them represented here tonight. Locherno driving the pink E&E Designs entry with Brent Mex riding in the Regiment entry. Mex, of course, in a Chevrolet. Locherno in one of the very few Fords that we've seen out here on the Speedway. If I remember correctly, there are only 3 Fords in this entire race, 3 Toyotas, and everyone else all running the Chevrolet Silverado here tonight. Again, just purely cosmetic differences between all of these trucks, though. It does not affect their driving abilities whatsoever. In real life, in the real NASCAR Camping World Truck Series, or I guess as it is now the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, there is a little bit of differences. It looks like Levin's having trouble. Levin's going to be up on the high line and falling back. Maybe thinking about pitting next time by and not wanting to be in the lead of this race when he does that. In the real life Craftsman Truck Series, there is very minor differences between all of the trucks. It's just they're not modeled here on the iRacing.com platform because honestly, they're so minor that it's not entirely worth having on here. And right now, despite the wide array of manufacturers, all 3 of them are having a bit of success all here tonight. All of them up in the top 5 in some capacity or another. And again, Locherno getting a bit wiggly through these corners. And everyone behind him kind of moving along with him, just trying to maintain that track to get the maximum fuel efficiency and fuel mileage that they can. And as we saw last time back on that caution on lap 19 or so, that can sometimes be the recipe for disaster for these truck drivers. And looking at that, looks like McMahon did able to time his pit stop how he needed to be. McMahon is currently a lap down in that number 87, but he is still together with the lead lap trucks. So if a caution were to come out right now, as long as he doesn't get collected in the wreck, he would be put back on the lead lap in that number 87. Currently being scored back in the 10th position, but that still is a potential top 10 for him in that number 87. Of course, McMahon, the rookie driver here tonight, making his first ever truck start on the iRacing.com platform. He's gained 3 positions, and that is 3 more than nothing, and every position counts for these points coming into the end of the season in these next 12 weeks. And of course, especially as a rookie driver, every chance to improve yourself is always a great thing. At 37 there, that's Art Hendren. He got a little bit loose coming down the backstretch at all. I thought for a second that he might be thinking about going down to pit lane, but he's got it back up on the speedway now. And he's got a little bit of a bubble around himself. Driving that all-black, unsponsored 37. Not too much of a surprise, as Hendren's car in the Pro American Late Model Series also unsponsored. But in that series, he drives more of an orange paint scheme. But here in Enigma, he's decided that all black is in fashion. And I'll tell you what, it's recognizable. There are a couple of other black trucks on the speedway, but they do have other colors as highlights. But he is rocking the all black with the white number, and honestly, that's kind of a paint scheme that we have seen in the real world NASCAR in all of its series multiple times, especially thinking back to like Ty Gibbs early on in his career. He didn't have any sponsors, so for the first couple of races he just ran a solid black car. And of course, now with NASCAR signing a deal with Craftsman again, you can see all of those bright red Craftsman banners across the top of these trucks, with a few exceptions. For example, that 22 of Joe Locherno, he actually still has the Camping World banner on his truck. Camping World was the sponsor of NASCAR's truck series for, I believe, just 2021 and 2022, because then before then it was Gander Outdoors and RV. So here on iRacing, the banner changes are not mandatory, so it gives a little bit of an interesting insight into when these drivers designed their respective paint schemes. That 6 of Brent Mex, that regiment entry, also running the black Camping World banner. So that gives you an idea that all the trucks out there with the Camping World banners were probably designed somewhere between 2021 and 2022, whereas these the Craftsman trucks out here were most likely designed in the last month or so, if not even less than that. I do believe we saw 1 or 2 drivers out there, maybe Scare if I recall correctly. Not Scare, but I believe actually that 83 of Michael McElroy is actually running a custom banner along the top of his truck, which of course is also an option. And speaking of McElroy and Phillips and Scare, even though Scare is not on the lead lap, look at the time of scoring. These 3 drivers are actually closing the gap to our lead lap pack. Just the 3 of them working together and not battling it out and just letting the aerodynamic forces propel their cars in the way they need them to, they are actually slowly but surely working their way back up to our race leaders. Because remember, about 10 laps ago, they were roughly 35 seconds back, so they've made up 15 seconds of ground just about on the lead lap pack of this race. And if things continue going the way they are right now, McElroy, Phillips, and Scare could all still be very valid competitors in this race. They still have a shot to win. That's not even considering if there's a caution. If a caution comes out, of course, they all will be lined back up with the rest of the field and given another shot. It's just a what if on how these next couple of laps play out until we potentially see our next set of green flag pit stops. Speaking of pit stops, let's actually take a look down at our pit board here, see how things are going for them. Looking at it, for the most part, everyone is running on the same general strategy. Tripp, Benedict's, Mex, Lotrino, Blevins, Hendren, the top 6 drivers right now all pitted on lap 20. As for Dickerson, McElroy, and Phillips, it looks like they came down pit lane on lap 20 under that yellow, decided they weren't happy with just how much fuel they took under the caution and came back down for another splash. But aside from McMahon, who of course pitted under that green, it looks like everyone right now is pretty much on the same pit strategy here. So we all just have to see, will things get shaken up when we come down to pit cycle number 2? Because right now, I'm not entirely convinced that these drivers have enough fuel to make it to the end. Of course, 80% fuel, NASCAR trucks do have a fairly decently large fuel tank, but we're also at the Daytona International Speedway. We are going 2.5 miles every single lap. And do a little bit of math there. That comes up to about 150 miles or 125 miles in just 50 laps. And I don't know, I don't think that these trucks have another 150 miles of fuel in them right now. Let you know, again, getting a little wiggly off the corner, going up to the high line before dropping it back down. Just behind him, Corey Blevins. Blevins was in the lead of this race for a brief amount of time in that Keys Architects Chevrolet. But let's be honest, at a track like Daytona, where things are so closely packed together for such a long period of time, there's basically bound to be pretty much every car in the field in the lead for at least a second or two. Maybe not even enough to score a complete lap to their name. But at some point, everyone is going to have an opportunity to be up there, because just the aerodynamic forces at play when all of these trucks are going roughly just a little bit under 190 miles per hour. The draft is just so strong that anyone really has a shot to get to the front as long as they're able to keep up in this main pack. And speaking of drivers managing to keep up to the main pack, McElroy and Phillips have closed the gap down to 14 seconds and going. These two drivers are going the entire extra mile necessary to try and catch back up. That says drivers are coming down pit lane now, and one of them's having trouble. That was the 88 of Scott Benedict's locking up the tires, getting a little bit loose. He might have downshifted a little bit faster than he intended in that number 88, but that is going to make pit cycle number 2 begin. And actually, drivers are going to be pitting in groups because, like I said, if you don't have a drafting partner, at least one, preferably a whole group, but at least one, you're going to be in for a very, very bad time. And sure enough, looks like Scare, Phipps, and Benedict's and Phillips have also all come down pit lane here tonight. So those drivers may be pitting a little bit earlier than they would have liked to, but by doing that, they have now caught up to the rest of the field, and they can actually be back in that main pack of trucks again. As the leaders come on by, though, going to be a little bit of a scary time as trucks re-enter the speedway from pit lane. And right now, that 6 of Brent Mex is getting his first taste of being up in the lead of this race here tonight, and Lotrenault just behind. Lotrenault maybe a little bit eager to get a taste of being in the front of the field and having that clean air in front of him himself. As we come around the speedway this time by, though, Mex gonna be going down low. Whether or not it's intentional, not quite sure. And it looks like Mex is going to be staying out. They are not pitting quite yet. Nope, they are coming down to pit lane. Mex, Lotrenault, Dickerson, and Lotrenault locking it up big time in that 22. He manages to get the car stopped, but that is not going to be doing his tires any favor. And that leaves just Blevins and Dwayne McMahon as these last two cars still out on the speedway. Dwayne, of course, a lap down. And going around Blevins right here actually would put him back on the lead lap, as these are the last two cars out on the speedway right now. And sure enough, as McMahon goes around Blevins, he is now on the lead lap, and just like that, he's back down one lap in that number 87 machine. Either way, he's in not an ideal position, but in the best position that he can put himself in right now, considering the circumstances. And this time by, Blevins is going to come down. Will we see McMahon follow? No, we not. McMahon is going to stay out. He did pit about 8 laps after everyone else did, so he does have a little bit more fuel under the hood of that Toyota than the rest of the field does. But right now, he's kind of in a little bit of no man's land, so he's just going to pull it on high, let those lead lap cars by. That's the 88 of Scott Benedict's and the 37 of Art Hendren. And also Kenny Tripp right up there as well in that number 12 machine. That said, Tripp a little bit slow. He is noticeably off the pace here, so whether or not he's letting off to decide and be at the back of the pack, or if he potentially has to come down pit lane again, remains to be seen. Not going to be coming down pit lane. Kenny Tripp just opting to maybe shuffle it back a couple of positions and play the long game as we cross the line. 50 laps in the books, 50 laps left to go for these truck drivers. They've made it through the halfway point. Still not any amount of time to relax though. A little bit further up in the field, there is a bit of another pack up here. This is Brent Mex, Larry Dickerson, and Joe Lotrenault all by themselves, still waiting for... No, Blevins actually made his pit stop, so his thing cycled out. Now it's just a matter of catching back up to him, which they have pretty handily. You can see the major speed difference between trucks when they're all formed up in a line drafting with each other and when they're just by themselves. You just simply can't compete with the forces at play here without other drivers giving you assistance. And here at the Daytona International Speedway, more than possibly any other track in North America, teamwork really does make the dream work here. Blevins now going to be falling back and catching on to the tail of this 4-car pack. These 4 cars are the ones that are duking it out for the lead here. And as we pull up the battle box, getting a little bit of extra stats about these drivers. Mex up 9 positions. Lotrino also up 9 positions here tonight. Both these drivers in considerable improvements from where they qualified. Of course, drafting out here at the high banks of Daytona and actually doing single car qualifying, two very different beasts here. You may be incredibly fast and incredibly good when it comes to navigating how your car handles with the draft affecting the aerodynamics of the car. But when you're by yourself, it is a whole different beast. And I think that's where we see some of these shine. It's why we see so many of these drivers that have gone up in position so tremendously is just because single car qualifying is not where they excel. But when they're able to run in this pack, that's where they're able to shine just a little bit. Now, of course, the pit cycle does also come into play here, and that wreck back on lap 19 was a big factor as well. But either way, some drivers having some pretty considerable improvements, and some drivers maybe not having the race that they were hoping for. Ross Phillips, the last car on the lead lap right now, currently down 9 positions from where he qualified. He started up in the front of this race, and now he's all the way back in 10th. And once again, he finds himself working together with Michael McElroy to try and catch back up to this lead pack of trucks. Now we got right here this pack of trucks battling out for the lead, and then a couple of positions back, we have a second pack working to do the exact same thing. This is 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, Benedict's, Tripp, Hendren, and McMahon. These 4 cars basically mimicking the exact same thing that the leaders of this race are doing here tonight. Just the 4 of them working together, maybe with a little bit less efficiency than the lead 4 trucks are doing. Of course, I say that, and there's a battle happening for the lead between these 4 trucks. Both sets of trucks, 2x2, all over the speedway. Nobody reckoned, but they decided maybe they're done drafting. They're enough single file for now. Now's the time to make the positions. After all, we have crossed the halfway point of tonight's race. And just like that, they're back to single file. These drivers are just constantly having to make decisions. Do I try and go for the pass, or do I just be patient and let things play out the way they are? And Dwayne McMahon is back down on pit lane in that number 87 machine. And the yellow flag is going to come out. Somebody has had trouble somewhere. Let's see if we can't figure out who it is. And it looks like it's the 83 of Michael McElroy. McElroy went around. Unless he's just exiting pits, I'm not quite sure here. But I think McElroy just gave him an unsafe pit exit penalty. I can't count on that one. I don't have access to race controls communications. But if he just moved on the speedway the way I think he did, then I think he just got an unsafe pit exit. I'm not quite sure. Let's rewind the footage. Let's take a look back and see. Oh, well, there's your issue, race fans. That right there looks a little bit like a bit of a recipe for disaster. Let's rewind the footage a little bit more. See if we can't get a better look of what's going on here. It looks like McElroy and Phillips, for all of their teamwork that they have been putting on here tonight, maybe the drafting didn't exactly work out for them, which is unfortunate to see, because these 3 cars have all been working together as a team incredibly well. But sure enough, just a little bit of wiggle was enough to upset the car, and that's going to send McElroy all the way down into the infield. Thankfully, McElroy, we're going to need another pit or another camera view of that. Let's triple check just to be safe. I want to make sure I'm not talking out of turn here. Let's watch that one again. McElroy ends up... Oh, that's close. I don't think he. Let's take one more look back at that just to be safe. Put it on slow-mo here. The question I am concerned about right now is, does McElroy go below the green cone? He does not. So by probably about 1 foot, McElroy is safe from getting a penalty there. So I was incorrect on saying he might have gotten an unsafe pit exit penalty there. He is good. He did not cross the green cone. If he did, iRacing would have penalized him for an unsafe pit entry, even though it's not his fault. That said, looks like pretty much everyone is down on pit lane right now. Let's see if we can't get a look at things. It looks like Blevins is going to be in the lead off of the pit lane, followed by Locherneau, Benedicts, and Tripp is going to be the next one up, followed by Phillips, then Dickerson. Nope, Dickerson's still stuck down there. So Art Hendren is going to be the next one out. Brennan Mex, Michael McElroy, Dwayne McMahon, and then Dickerson's actually going to come out of that pit stop in last there. So a little bit of a rough stop for some of these drivers. Let's see if we can't take a quick look back and see what their pit stop times were for that stop. Let's see. So look at these pit stops. Across the board, it looks to be, for the most part, the same. Benedict's was about 7 seconds slower than everyone else. Hendren as well, about 12 seconds slower than some of the other trucks on the speedway. So not all of these drivers having the pit stops that they were hoping for. But even then, despite Hendren having that 52-second pit stop, he did come back out in 6th place. It looks like Ross Phillips is actually going to be going back down pit lane here, so maybe he's not happy with how much fuel he got on pit lane. Actually, several drivers coming back down. Ross Phillips coming down, Michael McElroy coming down, Larry Dickerson also coming back down pit lane. So we saw this in the first half of the race. If we actually take a look back at that at the pit stop laps, it looks like Phillips, Dickerson, and McElroy are again doing a bit of a double dip on pit lane under caution. Because under the last yellow, they made 2 stops under caution, and under this yellow, they're again making 2 stops under caution. So it's definitely going to be, I have to keep an eye on those 3 drivers and see if whatever strategy they're cooking up manages to work out for them. It really looks like they are just trying to maximize fuel to their greatest extent in case this race runs green for the remainder of the way. Which, as we stack them up, that becomes an incredibly massive what if. As we always know, doesn't matter what discipline of racing it is, cautions breed cautions. Stacking the field back up only dramatically increases the chances of someone making a mistake and it taking out another driver or themselves, which is the inspiring words of wisdom that these drivers need to hear as they come to the green flag. Looks like we have 11 cars still on the lead lap. Justin Phipps a lap down. And green flag up in the air. Everyone is rolling without too much issue. I've now realized that the reason I've been so confused about Ross Phillips' last name is because there is a Phillips and a Phipps competing in this race. It only just occurred to me that these are 2 different drivers. 60 laps in to Daytona International Speedway, but now we've got that confusion cleared up and we've got trucks going 185 miles per hour down this 2.5 mile long speedway. 2 drivers stuck up on the high side. That is Brent Mex and Joe Locherneau. Both drivers managing to keep pace with the inside line here, but that's not going to last as soon as these tires come up to temp. Sure enough, you see Loturno already beginning to lose a little bit of ground here in that 22. Let's take a moment to ride on board with one of these drivers up here in the outside line. Let's take a ride on board with Brent Mex here and just get a view of what is going on in the truck here this evening. You can see down there on the bottom right, 180 miles per hour roughly. He's actually having to lift off the throttle a little bit because that truck, he's just getting propelled so quickly by the draft that he actually has to slow himself down coming into these corners. But pretty much it is full throttle all around the speedway for these drivers. 180 miles per hour non-stop. And at speeds like this, every little mistake can be what brings an end to your race, and potentially the race of everyone else in the field, because let's be honest, especially in these trucks that are designed like bricks and heavier than bricks, coming to a stop is not easy. But as we run, Corey Blevins still in the lead of this race. He is not down on pit lane right now. That is a little bit of an error by our folks back in the computer booth for timing and scoring. Corey Blevins very much is out on the speedway right now in that number 24 machine. He is leading this race. I believe he actually has the most laps led here tonight. He is pretty comfortable up there. That said, he does have the 88. That's Scott Benedict's back there right behind him. A little bit wiggly through the corner, but he does have it rolling. And McMahon, unfortunately, he's still in the draft. He has not lost the draft by any means in that 87, but it does look like he is maybe a little bit down on pace here tonight. He did say that his goal was just to ride out the race and make it to the end, and I know that doesn't sound like much, but again, when this is your first ever start in this truck at a speedway as extraordinarily demanding as Daytona International Speedway, I think that is quite the humble goal, and that's a goal that McMahon, so far, is on the way to achieve. He just has to make it through another 27 more laps in that 87 machine. 2x2 all throughout the front of the field, though. The gloves are starting to come off. Drivers are starting to maybe lose their patience a little bit and getting ready to try and get themselves in the necessary position to take home the win here tonight. And look at that. Despite being involved in that second caution, of course, between Phipps and McElroy, despite the spin that brought out the yellow, these two drivers that have been tandeming together for most of this race, about half a speedway behind everyone else, they're now together in the lead of this race. And of course, quite the gaggle of trucks right behind him. It looks like drivers are starting to decide the outside line is the way to be. Not everyone in agreement on that, though. That was, I believe, the 22 of Loturno shifting between the lanes just a little bit. And that, I think, was the 88 of Benedict's that had to go below the low line there a little bit. Sure enough, that Marines.com entry had to drift down just a little bit. I don't think he overtook anyone there in that number 88, so no harm, no foul. If anything, going below the yellow line, for the most part, only manages to impede your own race. But right now, he is in the 5th position, side by side with Dickerson, who's up on that high line. All of these trucks going where they need to be going, but will it be enough to be there at the end? In a little bit of trouble. That was the 24 of Blevins getting a nudge from behind by the 88, incredibly loose, and if there was any singular ounce more of force applied to that nudge, he probably would have spun up into the drivers on the outside line, but he managed to hang on to it by the skin of his teeth. And he's still in the top 3 in that number 24, with Phillips and McElroy leading the way for the field. I believe that these trucks are going to be holding it 2x2 at absolute minimum for the remaining 33-ish laps of this race. Kenny Tripp back up in the mix of this as well in that white Toyota. The Easy Rental number 12. One of the only Toyotas out here in the field here tonight, and he's running up in the top 3. And it's not that big of a surprise to me that it looks like all of the Toyotas here tonight are running the Craftsman banner, because the Toyota actually just a couple of months ago got a new body design for it. Of course, still only cosmetic on iRacing and minimal impacts to the real world racing, but Toyota did get a visual update to it to better correspond to how the actual road legal Toyota Tundra is. So pretty much everyone on the iRacing.com platform that drives the Toyota Tundra had to make a new paint scheme for it relatively recently. Unlike the Ford and the Ford and the Chevy have been untouched for at least a year now. But despite that, they're still looking mighty good out there on this speedway here today. 68 laps in the books. We are getting ready to start heading into the closing chapters of this race, and these 4 cars have kind of broken away from the rest of the field. Michael McElroy leading that second pack in the number 83, with Ross Phillips just behind him. These 2 trucks were the trucks leading the race only a lap ago, and now they're back into 5th and 6th respectively. It just goes to show how quickly things can change here at this speedway. One little mistake, one little hiccup, and if you break the draft, you're sinking back to the back. A little bit further back there, Brent Mex riding up on the high line in that number 6 truck. He's falling back down in the line now, but for a brief moment there, he was one of the only drivers trying to see if he can't form a second line. And that's always a bit of a daring move, a little bit risky to be doing since he is further back in the back of this pack. But trying to form a second line is a bit of a dangerous game, because if no one comes and helps you, then you're just a fish out of water and you're going to fall back to the back. And there's a truck down on the low line of that race. Would you believe me if I told you that that is the 66 of Mr. Johnny B making his way out to the speedway? He was involved in that first caution, and now he is 46 laps down. And mind you, these drivers are setting 50-second lap times, so let's round down 46 to, let's be generous, 40 minutes down on pit lane for the driver of the 66, and he has come back out on the speedway. He is still ready to persevere and just, if nothing else, get extra seat time under his belt. But if he's lucky, potentially a wreck happens and he manages to make up a position or 2. The chance of that happening, really slim though. Actually, I don't think it is mathematically possible. No, it's not mathematically possible for Johnny B to make up any more positions here tonight. But regardless, he's still giving it his all. He's showing the racing spirit, so to speak. And he's coming back out on the speedway and just enjoying driving cars. Again, Brent Mex over here trying to form a second line. Will he have any takers to join him up there? So far, it's looking like the verdict is no, but Mex can't hold it up there for very long because he is losing speed not being in the draft. And if he doesn't come back down, McElroy is going to fill that gap, and he is going to potentially have to filter all the way back to the back of this pack. I say that though, he actually was keeping pace with the inside line down the backstretch. He is losing a bit of ground on Le Tourneau here. The other pink truck out here on the speedway, one a Ford, one a Chevy. And sure enough, Max maybe considering getting back down a little bit. McElroy actually is falling back. It looks like this second pack is actually losing a little bit of ground here tonight, which is kind of surprising to see. Sure enough, the gap is widening here. We can take a look at the relative here. McElroy currently in the 6th position. He is leading this little pack right here. And then there's almost a full second gap between himself and Max and Metronome and Trip and the rest of the cars in the front of this race. Looking at the timing, they are closing the gap back in just a little bit. Looks like he and Phillips have maybe decided to go back to teamwork mode and see if they can't do what they've done time after time here tonight and get back up to these race leaders. But imagine, once they're up there and once we're in these last couple of laps, it's going to be the end of teamwork time. The gloves are going to come off, and these two drivers are going to be battling each other with everything they've got to work with. Looking across the speedway, it does look like McElroy, Phillips, and Dickerson are on their own little bit of a unique pit strategy. Everyone on the speedway has pit 3 times, except McElroy, Phillips, and Dickerson, who have all pit 5. Just from doing the little bit of the double whammy down on pit lane under each of these cautions. So now the big what if remains is, will those extra little splashes of fuel pay off for them? Because it looks like all 3 of them only sent about 5 seconds down in their pit box on their second pit stops under caution. So that's enough for maybe a gallon of fuel at best. Which is a matter of laps here. So if our leaders end up running out of fuel, it could just be what McElroy and Phipps need to get to the end of this race. We've seen races come down to fuel strategy down in the short track side of things, but here in NASCAR, the significance of doing your math correctly and having the exact amount of fuel you need to make it to the end of the race is only much more dramatically accentuated, because here the track is so big that pit stops are just a much more significant factor. You can't just luck out and roll back to your pit stop if you run out of gas in turn number 2, like you could at a short track. Here, if you're out of gas, you're going to have to take the tow, and that's pretty much guaranteed to be the end of your race, especially with only 25 laps left to go here tonight. If we do see trucks run out of fuel, though, that would be in the last 2, 3, maybe 4 if they really messed something up with their fuel calculations. But for the most part, that's going to be like a final lap deal breaker if they were to have done it wrong. And that's a very big if. There's a very decent chance out here that all the drivers out here in this field have done their homework, have their fuel calculations set up where they need it to be, and everything's all hanky-dory for them. But there is always the what if something goes wrong for these drivers. Right now, everyone on the speedway running it over in single file right now. No one's really trying to make any passes for position. They know we're in the final closing hours of this race, so now it becomes a little bit of a guessing game of, if I make the pass right here, right now, will I be able to hold on to it for the next 24 laps? And I think a lot of these drivers right now, they're thinking, no, I can't. There's just too many forces at play here for me to reliably hold on to the lead of this race for the next 24 laps. Which also puts Blevins in particular in a sticky situation, because now he's got to think, what am I going to be able to do to hold on to the lead of this race for the next 24 laps? Because ultimately, these drivers do have the means to pass each other right now if they wanted to. But if they pass each other right now and it turns out that it bites them in the butt, then everything could become crumbling apart. So right now, everyone's kind of just waiting to see what the others around them are going to do. It does look like they're all just driving in a circle in a straight line, which ultimately they are. Like, there's no denying that. That is exactly what is happening. They are driving in a straight line around a circle. But it's also just this really intricate game of chess and trying to be the one who manages to outsmart your opponents and manage to make that overtake at the exact opportune time where the person you overtook isn't going to be able to take it back. Everyone throughout this field, every single car still on the lead lap is in this train right here. Corey Blevins all the way back down to Mr. Dwayne McMahon are all on the lead lap here. Johnny B, of course, 46 laps down. He's actually right up there in front of our race leaders. He's holding it up as high as he can. Of course, don't want to scrape the outside wall, but right now his game plan is just to stay as far out of the way of the leaders as absolutely possible. And he is doing just that. Everyone's rolling on down low below him. And I'd imagine that once McMahon gets by him, he's just going to drop on down and tag along to the tail of this field, because why not? Once he's back there, I mean, he gets his car up to speed, and there's not a whole lot he has to worry about. There's not really any chance of him wrecking someone from the back of the draft. And sure enough, he's going to drop on down, hook on to the draft of McMahon, and he's just going to run his race back there and have a merry old time in that number 66, and maybe start scheming on what he's going to do at IRP to maybe have a little bit of a better race than he has had here tonight at Daytona. But sure enough, Daytona is the chaos track after all. Anyone can win, and at the same time, anyone can lose in a very dramatic fashion. So I'd imagine, of course, everyone here is trying to figure out what they're going to be able to do to take home the win in 20 laps from now. But imagine there's lots of other drivers that are like, I finish wherever I finish here tonight. What am I going to do next week to get myself up to the top of the championship? And we got a whole pack of cars down pit lane. McElroy, Phillips, Dickerson, Scare, and McMahon have all made their way down to pit lane here. And rolling on down, all these cars making their respective stops. What's going to be the verdict for these drivers? 2 tires for McMahon. And that looks like it's it. Everyone else just taking fuel. McMahon was the only driver in this pack to come down pit lane that took tires. And hence you saw him taking a couple of seconds longer to get off pit lane, which, I mean, 1 or 2 seconds, that doesn't sound like a big deal. But now his chances of catching up to the rest of the pack, the rest of the cars that pitted with him, are basically none. He has lost the draft. He cannot catch back up to the field unless a caution comes out now. So McMahon has himself in a little bit of a difficult situation. That said, the lead pack is coming around the speedway, so McMahon could just be putting himself right back where he was in the middle of this race, where he pit at a different time from everyone else and just so happened to come back out onto the speedway right in front of the race leaders and was managed to hook onto them and get back on the lead lap when a caution came out. Right now, this lead pack here, Blevins, Benedict's Tricks, Lotrino, and Mex in the top 5. And looks like everyone's coming to pit lane this time by. Everyone still out on the speedway is making their way down now. So that will be the 4th pit stop for everyone making their way down here. And one driver having a little bit of trouble getting to their box, but they're all down now. That was Art Hendren. And looks like Hendren overdrove his pit stall, question mark? We don't see him backing up. So I guess he got it and it's just a little bit of a depth perception issue there. But Hendren, he's going to spend a lot more time on pit lane than he probably would have liked to. He's still down on pit lane. And he's still down on pit lane. We are now at... He wasn't in his pit box. He wasn't in his pit box at all. Okay. So that's a little bit disastrous for the driver of that number 37 machine. He's coming back out on the speedway now. I don't think he ever actually ended up in his pit box there. That's going to put Hendren back as the last car on the lead lap, back in 11th position. He's 10, 11, almost 12 seconds back from McMahon, so a little bit of an oopsie on Hendren's part, and with 18 laps to go, if a caution doesn't come out, that could be a really big issue for the driver of that number 37 machine. Made our way back up to the front. Kenny Tripp also not down on pit lane. He is in the lead of this race right now, and he's currently behind he is in the lead of this race. Behind him, the 24 of Corey Blevins. He's going to fall back a couple of positions there. Simply, just the two trucks by themselves don't have the momentum they need to keep up with that pack of four on the high line. And now Michael McElroy and Ross Phillips once again find themselves in the lead of this race. These two drivers have been working together pretty much all evening tonight. And it's like I said, especially at Daytona, teamwork is what makes the dream work, and teamwork is exactly what McElroy and Phillips have been putting together here tonight. And Zach Scare is still in this battle as well. He is back another position. Dickerson is in the middle of this little bit of a battle. But Scare has been working together with McElroy and Phillips incredibly well as well. And he went from being stuck a lap down for most of this race. He's running up in position number 4 now in that number 82 machine. So I'll tell you what, it's just Daytona is the track of chaos. You never know what's going to happen here, and it seems like pretty much we've seen just about everything happen here in these past 85 laps. 16 left to go. Still a whole lot of time for these drivers to get themselves sorted out. Let's call it a little bit around 45-ish miles. A little bit less than 45 miles left on this speedway for these drivers to contend with each other. And big wiggle, massive wiggle there for Lotrenault. He managed to hang on to it, but Lotrenault very nearly spinning there in that 22. That was probably the biggest wiggle we've seen out of the E&E Designs entry all night. He's got it rolling still, but that was scary, and I imagine it might have been a code brown for a couple of the drivers here in this field. 15 left to go, going to be 14 as we cross the line, and everyone in the top 8 here is all under a blanket here tonight. McElroy in the lead of this race still, but Tripp is coming up on the outside line, that number 12, with support from Blevins. And Blevins, it's kind of an interesting position that these drivers find themselves in, because Blevins has been leading a lot of this race, and by a lot, I mean a lot of this race. But now he's back in P number 3. He has no choice to help the race leader now if he wants to get back into the lead of this race himself. And that's kind of what makes the super speedway racing so special, is that you have to team up with other drivers, potentially other drivers you don't even like. I'm not saying that McElroy or that Blevins and Tripp don't like each other. I don't know that about either of them at all. But just the implications of super speedway racing in general, you could be forced to team up with someone that you just straight up don't like. Because if you don't, you're going to lose to someone that does have a buddy. And again, Lotrenault having a little bit of a wiggle. That 22 truck not handling the way he wants it to be. He still got it up in the top 6, looking to break into the top 5, but as we bunch things up here, this is where things are going to start getting scary, race fans. 13 laps to go. Closing in on 12 as we cross the line, and we are 2 by 2. 5 drivers even. There's one driver down on the grass. That's Michael McElroy. He comes back up onto the speedway, manages to save in that 83, but is he close enough to catch the draft back up? I don't think he is. He's not. McElroy's out of the draft. He's not going to be able to catch up to the lead lap cars unless he falls back an entire 27 seconds and teams up with Brent Mex. Another driver down on low line there. That is Ross Phillips. Now that puts us in an interesting situation. Are we going to see Phillips drop back so that he can catch McElroy back out to the field? With 12 laps to go, that is a very, very risky move. Gear's off the pace as well. It looks exactly like that's what's happening. Scare and Phillips have abandoned their chances at leading this race, at least in the time being, so that they can help their teammate get back into the fight. I'll tell you what, race fans, if that is not a story of teamwork and commitment, then I don't know what is. But sure enough, McElroy, Scare, Phillips, they're catching back up to the lead lap pack now. These two drivers let off the gas, knowing that they are putting themselves in an incredibly risky situation to catch their teammate back up to the field. And sure enough, as we get ready to cross the line for 10 laps to go, all three of them have closed the gap and are now back in the draft of the main pack. I'll tell you what, these three drivers are drivers that we are going to be having to keep our eyes on for the entire rest of the season, super speedway racing or not. That's more commitment that I have seen out of teammates than I have seen out of a racing team on iRacing, at least outside of Williams Esports, cough cough. Not going to bring them up, that's a whole can of worms, but I'm impressed. I did not expect to see that much commitment out of these drivers. One car heading down to pit lane, though. That looks like that might be the 66 of Johnny B. No, he's not heading down to pit lane. He's just getting out of the way of the leaders. And for a second there, I could have swore I heard the sound of sheet metal breaking. It looks like everyone's got it rolling, though, but I could have swore we just heard an accident, but it looks like everyone's good to go here. And there it is. That's Art Hendren up in the outside wall. He's still got it rolling, though. Art Hendren, that 37, a lap down as it is. And he's got damage on the 37. That's not going to help at all. When I said the gloves are coming off, the gloves are coming off. These drivers are not holding any more punches as we are within the last 10 laps to go here tonight. And oh boy, what a battle it has been, and what a battle it's going to be in these next 8 laps. Locherneau looking down to the low line, even lower than he was before. Now he's going to move it up high. Is he going to push it 3 wide in that 22? He's thinking about it. Does he have the momentum to do it, though? Looks like no. Phillips is going to move down to block. And also, can we just take a minute to say, excuse me? Phillips is back up in the lead of this race. Or he was, at least for a second there. He's contending for the lead of this race in that number 5. After voluntarily letting off the gas, losing a good 10 seconds of time, so that he could draft together with McElroy. And now these two drivers are up contending for the lead of this race with 8 laps to go, making it 7 as we come across the line. What a race this has been. A little bit of wiggle, though. That was, I believe, that was Scare having a little bit of trouble. He was having to fall back a couple of positions. Dickerson also was a little loose there. And Locherneau, again, making some big moves, not committing to them, but certainly thinking about them. Locherneau really just trying to find whatever piece of real estate he can and make it work. And again, Locherneau almost into the 69 of Dickerson just like that. Just barely managed to avoid the contact, and very heads-up driving by Dickerson to manage to swerve to avoid it. But 6 laps to go, and these drivers are really, we're getting into somewhat dangerously daring territory here now. 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. Blevins, Phillips, Tripp, McElroy, Benedicts making up the top 5. Trading positions pretty much every single part of this track. Every single sector, we have a new race leader. But right now it's Phillips. And Phillips is going to move on down to the low line and see if he can't make it work for him. McElroy just behind, leading the outside line in the 83. And there's a lapped car up on the high line. That is McMahon. McMahon getting ready to go down a lap. And how are we going to handle getting around that lap car? By pushing it 3 wide, of course. 3 wide down the front stretch. And everyone navigates it safely. But that must have been a pretty scary sight for the driver of that number 87 machine. 5 laps to go around this 2.5 mile long speedway. Big high five up in the air. Going to be 12.5 miles left to go, and this far around the speedway, making it more like 12 miles left around this speedway. That's not a whole lot of time left for these drivers to negotiate with each other. And I'd imagine some of the friendships and some of the alliances that we have seen form over the past 100 laps are going to start to collapse as we get into the closing laps of this race. Brent Mex pulling it down below the double yellow line. Mex going a lap down, not wanting to interfere with what is going on here because he knows if he does not get out of their way, then they are going to drive straight through him. Four laps to go around this speedway. And a little bit of nudging again. Tripp. A little bit of contact. Blevins a little bit of contact. Phillips a little bit of contact there. And big wiggle for Dickerson there. Lotrenault as well getting a bit loose. Getting up to the marbles up on the high banks. 3 laps to go as we cross the line. These drivers doing everything in their power to give me a heart attack here. Haven't quite had one yet. Whether or not we manage to last these last 3 laps is a big what if. And Phillips again getting incredibly loose. He's getting bump drafted by the 24 of Blevins. Phillips and Blevins, this is their first time working together here tonight. And the 82 of Scare's going to move down though. Scare's going to try and help his teammate there. And McElroy and Dickerson both move down as well. And now Lotrenault's leading the high line. There's trouble. Lotrenault gets collected, and that's going to bring out caution number 3 here tonight. And that is just about every car in the field involved. I'm going to be honest with you, race fans. That's about what I expected to happen for the past 15 laps. Michael McElroy, the lucky driver that drives away scot-free with his buddy, teammate, alliance member, or just another guy out on the speedway. SA2 is Zach Scare, the only 2 drivers to survive the chaos that just unfolded here at the Daytona International Speedway. We're going to need to take a look back at that. There's a lot that we need to unpack that just happened to all these drivers. And I think, I don't want to say this for sure, but I think that this all originated with that number 22 of Mr. Joe Lotrenault. Let's see if we can't see what happened here. And sure enough, Lotrenault and Dickerson get together. Dickerson goes down the low line, picks up Tripp. Picks up so many other people, I can't even tell exactly who all is there. Dickerson's there. Tripp is there. Blevins is there. Phillips is there. Benedicts is there. McMahon's involved. If you put every single driver on a dartboard right now and threw a dart blindfolded at it, you'd most likely hit a driver who was involved in that incident. That's another one. I think we're going to need to break out the slow-mo camera here. Lotrenault and Dickerson get together. Dickerson tries to correct, and Tripp moves down to avoid. Tripp and Scare get involved, and then Phillips gets involved. The 88 goes up high. That is Scott Benedicts. Benedicts gets collected, which collects the 24. That's Blevins. pretty much everyone is here. Everyone is involved in this wreck in some capacity except McElroy, and Scare. What a way to put tonight's event here into overtime tonight, race fans. Let's see if we can't get one more good look back at that. We're going to ride back on board again with a driver that we've ridden on board with here before, with Brent Mex here tonight. Going on board with him, looking at what all just unfolded. Slams on the brakes like a responsible driver. He sees just a wall of smoke and broken dreams in front of him, and his own car gets a little loose. He might have broke a little bit harder than the tires were allowing for it to happen. He got a little bit loose. And that's a whole lot of wrecked race cars and a whole lot of hurt feelings to round out our event here tonight at the Daytona International Speedway. And sure enough, that's 2 cars up in the front of this race that stayed out of pit lane. That's Michael McElroy and Zach Scare. The next car behind them, that's Larry Dickerson, back in 3rd place, who is currently pretty much the entire speedway behind the rest of these drivers. Let's pull up the time and scoring. I know time and scoring, not always the most reliable when we're under caution here. So it does look like we have 6 cars left on the lead lap here tonight. That is looking correct. Everyone has to catch up to the lead lap cars because everyone had to come down pit lane. Some of these drivers all the way up to their 7th pit stop. Let's pull up the pit strategy diagram. Not because I expect there to be any useful information on there, but let's just take a look at how many pit stops these drivers have done. They have been all over the place here tonight. You're going to look at the stint length, so about what you would expect to be. For McElroy, it was 20 laps, 25 laps, 10 laps, 23 laps, 20 laps. And that's not even showing all of his pit stops, because he has been down to pit lane twice. So this only shows the, or no, there's one in there. It's just so tiny you can't see it because he did a double dip down on pit lane. So there is a six stop there. It's just you can't see it. It's so tiny. But still, these pit stops are all over the place, especially in the later half of this race. Things have been thrown into all sorts of chaos here tonight in, dare I say, the most wonderful way possible. Not wonderful for the drivers, but wonderful for the folks up here watching the race from home. Who could ask for a more exciting explosion of trucks and sheet metal than we just got here at the Daytona International Speedway? And it looks like the lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car, so we will be going green next time by. And it does look like we do have 7 cars on the lead lap now. It does look like Tripp got the wave around. That said, he's still on his way around pit lane, so I don't think Tripp is going to catch back up to the rest of the pack before we go green. He might. He might just be able to if he absolutely floors it with every ounce of speed he's got. But I don't think he's going to be able to. He has to make up 1 minute and 22 seconds of deficit before we get back up to the front of the race. He might do it. He might just be able to do it. He is trying his best here. He's tandem drafting with another driver to catch up to the iRacing.com pace car. I'll tell you what, race fans, you gotta do what you gotta do at Daytona, and if you got a tandem draft with someone to catch the pace car before we go green flag racing here again for NASCAR overtime, then that's what you gotta do. That said, the pace car is in turn number 4 now, and they are both back in, coming out of turn number 2, going down the backstretch. They're not going to catch the pace car in time. I don't think they're going to be able to do it. So they could be lucky. They could make it happen while the rest of the field is going up through the gears. but that is a very big what if. iRacing.com pace car is off. Trip is not going to catch back up to the rest of the field. We are rolling. NASCAR overtime here tonight. Let's hear it a little bit for a bit of an encore for these truck drivers. McElroy Scare making up the front two drivers here tonight, and both of them have very fast race cars under the hood, evidently. They're both pulling away from the rest of the field without much trouble. But aside from Mex was not involved in that caution. He managed to bring his truck to a stop. But everyone else, everyone behind them, was involved in that caution in some capacity. And it looks like some of them may be having a little bit of aerodynamic trouble or a little bit of engine power trouble beneath their hoods. Because now it all comes down to these three drivers. Everything comes down to this for McElroy, Mex, and Scare. White flag up in the air. Three cars battling it out for the lead. Hendren catching up. Hendren is not out of this battle. He is managing to gain a little bit of ground. Will it be enough in this final lap around the speedway? McElroy, Scare, Mex, your top three drivers. Mex gets the run off the corner. He's actually looking to get his way into P number 2. He's side by side with Scare going down the backstretch. I don't think he's going to be able to hold on to this battle, though. He just doesn't have the momentum necessary to hold on to that position compared to two cars that are drafting each other. Coming out of turn number 4, McElroy looks like he has a comfortable lead, but Mex and Scare are gaining on him. Will he be able to hold on to it? Sure enough, McElroy going to take home the win for the first ever race of the Enigma Truck Racing Series. 100 laps at the Daytona International Speedway, and that number 83 driver is the driver that's gonna bring it on home here this evening. Right behind him, teammate or maybe just battle buddy, the 82 of Zach Scare, with Brent Mex rounding out the podium here tonight. What a race this has been, race fans. McElroy involved in at least one caution, maybe even two, and now he's got it brought on down to the backstretch. Maybe thought about doing a burnout, but he is going to bring it back around to the front of the field now in that number 83. Bring it on up to the grandstands. If you're going to do a victory celebration, you might as well do a victory celebration that all of the fans are going to be able to appreciate. Short on enough. McElroy bring it on down to the checkered flag. The start finish line here tonight. And we're going to get a little bit of a celebration from the driver, that number 83. Not looking all that different from the spin he was involved in back in around lap 50. But that's okay. The difference is that this one's intentional. What a monumental feat, though. The first driver to take home a win in this budding brand new league and a track like Daytona. That is something that I'm sure is going to go down in the record books for the Enigma Truck Racing Series for plenty and plenty of time to come here. That said, don't go anywhere, race fans. We will be back in just a moment with interviews with your top 3 finishers here this evening. We'll be right back, race fans. Don't go anywhere. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back to the Daytona International Speedway, and welcome back to the first round of the Enigma Truck Racing Series. It's been a very long, very hectic 100 laps at the Daytona International Speedway, and I've got Mr. Michael McElroy up here in the booth with me. Michael, what a race that was. There was a couple of points at this race where we really thought it was going to be the end for you. We thought it was just going to be complete disaster. And here you are, the first driver to have ever scored a win here in this league. How are you feeling now that everything's done tonight?
Pretty good, man. And I don't think you could have said it better. I mean, I had two spinouts, which were just hugging that yellow line around the tri-oval a little too close, but it was uh it was definitely fun. We had a good team working together, getting back up there, make sure we didn't lose anybody on the team. And overall, I mean, it was a fun race. I know it's a smaller field, but I mean, everybody out there seemed like they were having fun. It was a good time.
Yeah, everyone out there seemed like they were having fun, and I'll tell you from up here, everyone out there put on an amazing race, and only honestly makes me even more excited for what's going to be coming up in the remainder of this season. Looking at next, well, not next week, we have next week off, but looking at our next event, we're going to be heading to quite the different track from this one. We're going to be heading to Indianapolis Raceway Park, Lucas Oil, IRP, whatever you want to call it. We're heading to a significantly shorter, significantly flatter speedway than this one. How do you think y'all will be faring heading down to Indianapolis?
I think our whole team has pretty good dynamics. I think we have our short track racers, we have our mile and a halfers, we have our super speedway guys. So I think our team's gonna really stand out, and we're each gonna get our turn up on the podium. And it's unfortunate that we lost Ross and Larry there close to the end, but yeah, I think they're gonna get their time up here, and it might even be as soon as next week.
Well, whatever happens, I am certainly excited to see what y'all manage to bring to this league in these next couple of weeks. Tonight was a heck of a race. It was a heck of a great show. I'm really excited for next week, and I'm sure all of y'all are as well. But of course, before I let you go and celebrate being the first ever winner here in ETRS, the red carpet's rolled out, the microphone's all yours, Mr. McElroy. Anyone you want to thank for getting that number 83 up here on the victory lane?
Yeah, definitely. Big shout out to Larry, Ross Phillips, Zach Scare, who's also up here in the booth. Um, I apologize to Ross. He just told me our team name, and I already forgot it again. So I was gonna give a shout out to the team, but I think it was like Midwest Mafia or something like that. But yeah, big shout out to the team, and thanks to you, man, for putting all this on for us and broadcasting it. And big shout out to Matt for doing race control and being giving us a good unbiased point of view of the race.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, Michael. Shout out to the name whose team we don't remember. And I look forward to seeing y'all at IRP next week.
Yeah, man, appreciate it.
And coming back into position number two, that's going to be the number 82 of Mr. Zach Scare. What a race that's been, and what just. I'm still processing everything that just went through in these last 10 laps. How are you feeling down there? Bring it home in P number two.
To be honest, I don't know, man. That we're lucky to even be there, starting 2 laps down.
Yeah, it was quite
So
an event, and I didn't even think that you qualified for the race. I wrote you off. I
no,
was like, "Yep, this guy, he showed up, he decided he didn't want to run, and that's that." And now you are up here on the podium. What a
no,
turnaround.
I was trying to connect. I connected, and then I had an issue with my wheel. It wasn't connected, and then I couldn't connect to the actual race. So I restarted my PC, then got back on. Same thing. It just yeah. It was definitely interesting.
Well, between Michael being spun multiple times and you having pretty much every single technical issue that could have happened leading up to this race, it sounded like to me that Daytona was a little bit of a story of a whole lot of heartbreak and a whole lot of triumph. And I gotta give a big shout out to y'all for managing to bring home a podium finish despite everything you've had to go through in the past hour and a half.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That was all teamwork, man. To be honest with you.
So, looking at the schedule, not next week because we're off next week, but our next event is going to be at quite a different track. We're heading on down to the Indianapolis Raceway Park, Lucas Oil Speedway. How are you feeling heading into that?
We're gonna need a lot of practice. Let's just put it that way.
Practice makes perfect, and well, if y'all have shown anything here tonight, it's teamwork makes the dream work. So I believe in y'all.
I agree with that 100%.
Of course, though, before I let you sign out and go celebrate getting a podium finish there with your teammate, the red carpet's rolled out, the microphone's all yours. How are you? Or I can speak. Who do you want to thank on the side of that number 82 machine for getting you up here?
I just appreciate the team, Midwest Mafia, Mike, Ross, and all that, and Larry. And hopefully next week we can all be up there, or 2 weeks we can all be up there.
Well, that sounds like a good plan, and I certainly look forward to seeing what all y'all got going on heading into Indianapolis next week. Thank you
I
for
appreciate
coming
it.
out,
Thank you.
and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good one.
And looking down at the well, he was there a second ago, Mr. Brett Max. He was in the waiting room, but I guess he left. I'll give him a minute to see if he comes back. Because he was there in the waiting room. I saw him out there, and I was just about to let him in, and it looks like he left. Which is very unfortunate because Mex, one of the full-time drivers over on Wednesday night, and a driver that I've not yet gotten the opportunity to speak to, and I was really excited to speak to him here tonight. But it doesn't look like that's gonna be the case. We're not getting him to pick up, so might just be two drivers we get an interview with here tonight, but I'm sure the opportunity will arise yet again to speak to Mixer Mex because he put on a heck of a race here tonight. It does look like we're not going to be able to hear from Brett Mex, unfortunately, though. Yeah, it doesn't look like he's coming back in. So for now, we will go ahead and give a couple of closing remarks here tonight. First off, I just gotta say, what an event it has been. That's all that can really be said right now. First time ETRS has run this league, and of course, my first time as a broadcaster doing anything in the realm of NASCAR. I've always been a short track guy myself, so this has been a very different experience for me. But I'll tell you what, I am a very big fan of everything that went on here tonight. And of course, as always, like I've been saying, you are welcome to join the Enigma Truck Racing Series if you are interested. It is a $15 entry fee. All you gotta do to apply is apply to the league, iRacing League number 6357. Or no, not 6357, 9357. Ignore what I said. It is 9357. And I think that covers just about everything here tonight. We will take a quick look down at the race results here tonight just to get everything squared away. This is not official. Of course, post-race penalties can be handed out by race control. But as things stand right now, Michael McElroy going to take home the very first checkered flag here of the Enigma Truck Racing Series in that number 83 entry, followed by his teammate, the 82 of Zach Scare, with Brent Max in the 6 rounded out position number 3. Fourth place going to go back to the 37 of Art Hendren, with Larry Dickerson in the 69 rounding out the top 5 here tonight. Sixth place, going to go back to the rookie driver, the 87, Dwayne McMahon, the driver who said he has never driven a NASCAR truck before in his life before this race, bringing it home in P number 6. Seventh, going to go back to the 12 of Kenny Tripp, with Ross Phillips in the 5, bringing it home P number 8. Ninth, going to come back to Corey Bevlins, with Scott Benedicts rounding out the top 10. 11th, going to go back to Joe Letourneau in the 22, with Mr. Johnny B bringing it home in position number 12. And finally, rounding out the rest of the field here tonight, that's the number 89 of Justin Phipps and the 29 of Kevin Church. Before we sign it off for this evening, let me take another quick check. Do we have Brent Mex anywhere in the waiting room? Looks like no. Looks like Brent Mex is headed back to his hauler. He has packed his stuff up. he's already raring and ready to go to the Lucas Oil Indianapolis Raceway Park next week. That's a bit of a drive from Daytona, so I don't blame him. He's got a little bit of a road trip under his belt that he has to do to get ready for our second round of the Enigma Truck Racing Series. But for tonight, this is all we've got from the Daytona International Speedway. Of course, a massive thank you to everyone tuned in, both from myself and from everyone at the Enigma Truck Racing Series. And we'll see you all, not next week, because it's Super Bowl weekend, and we can't interrupt the Super Bowl, but the weekend after that. Same day, same time, Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern for round number 2 of the Enigma Truck Racing Series. Thank you all for coming out, race fans, and I will see you all in the next couple of weeks. Have a good evening.